All of the pictures that I picked for the show are pictures of children, young people, people around me. I started doing this series kind of subconsciously when people were hiring me to photograph portraits of the children. And I was always trying to figure out a way to get images for my portfolio when I had access to some of the children. Is how all of this started, with the series of children that are family members and friends of family members. This photograph here, Finally Free, is a very interesting photograph for me because around this time I was photographing a lot of portraiture, and I was noticing the parallel bars reflected in a lot of things at that time. And I guess at 28, I'm seeing myself behind those bars to whatever extent, metaphorically, mentally, physically, whatever the case is. And when I photographed this image, I recognized that for the first time I was seeing the bars, the prison, the rail, the fence, and it was like it was open, which was interesting because it was me first moving back to Cleveland, telling myself I wanted to take all the pictures that I didn't take pictures of when I was a kid with the camera. Which was people that were around me. Ultimately, my early introduction with the camera and photography, my primary use was at school. So I didn't really take the camera home and photograph my family and friends and people around me. So in 2008, me transitioning back from New York, I was wanting to do it consciously. This was very, very early on that journey. So 2017, I'm very, very conscious and very aware that my images illustrate bars, rails, the vertical, barrier, whatever people want to call them, they showed up in my work consciously at 14. I have a self-portrait that I did of myself, and I was obsessed with these banisters and rails on the side of Cleveland School of the Arts and the shadows that they cast. So me being aware of that, it's like when you get a car and you see it everywhere. You know what I mean? Like as soon as you get it, or as soon as you know you want that specific thing. So this is just me traveling with the camera. I'm at Shaker High School, going to a football game with my little cousin Michaela. That's one of his little sisters. And football game is over. We're waiting in the back parking lot near where they store the dumpsters. And all the little kids around me, all of my little cousins, they jump up on the fence and say, "Let's play jail." And they say, "Oh, well, you're being bad." So they put one of them behind the bars, and then now they're all walking on the bars. And I'm sitting here like, oh, this is fucking amazing. Like, I couldn't make this up. Like, if I'm in conversations about being black and racism and institutional racism and the perception that's being created in the environments that we're in, and the imagery and the role the images play and continuously play in the movies, it was like, oh, okay, this is one of those moments that I get to witness, that I get to bring to that conversation. This is a 3 or 4 year old little girl with her 3, 4, or 5 year old little cousin saying, "Let's play jail." To me, you get the truth out of the children that are around you. They don't know necessarily to hide it. So, this is lit the way I like to light my work, which is backlit, strong use of silhouettes. And that pattern is, being illustrated in yet another photograph. This is definitely like one of my favorite photographs because it's something that you can't refute. It's something that's undeniable. The adult perceptions can look at this and tell all kinds of stories and say all these things that they want to say. But for me, it reveals truth. And that truth is when you're 3 and when you're black and when you're already bombarded with the experiences of the adults around you, and you are already taking in the imagery that's in the environment that reflect you, you're aware that jail is a place for bad people who look like you. And so you play it when you get around, vertical items that have spaces and gaps in them that could be imagined and envisioned as a prison. So this is a portrait of my little cousin, Michaela, who's also the young lady who's no longer 3 from the photograph they was playing jail. So ultimately, her dad and I are really, really close cousins. And this was maybe a day or 2 after her uncle passed away, which is my cousin Quandale, who was like my first friend. Like, this is like a huge, huge loss in the family. And it was like 4th of July. We kind of went to hang out, took the kids downtown, and I'm just always carrying the camera. My thought is, like I said, in 2008, I decided that I wanted to carry my camera with me and take pictures of all this stuff that I had never been kind of like formally instructed to shoot. So, you know, the way I use the camera is very much a coping mechanism device. I mean, I use it in a lot of different forms, but I carry the camera around with me to replace me biting my nails, you know? So I would be biting my nails in all these situations that I didn't have a camera to actually take pictures. So that's what I do. I take pictures when I'm in these situations. It's kind of how I get through it, you know, and how I do something with the energies that's being kind of created. So once I started to kind of become familiar with like Gordon Parks's work that wasn't the popular work, I think somebody gave me one of the documentaries on him, and I can remember in that documentary a little boy who he had photographed, and I'm not sure what country this kid was in, but he was like a 50-year-old man at the time of the documentary, and he was sharing his experience in life, you know, I guess during and then after Gordon Parks came to photograph him. And it was kind of like, oh, wow. It was amazing to me because it was kind of like this photographer activated this guy's life in a way where it made him see himself as, I guess, more than what he would have saw himself as without the experience of Gordon Parks coming into his environment. And, you know, I remember watching that documentary, and then I remember thinking to myself, and I might have been living in New York at the time, that nobody was ever going to pay me to go back to Cleveland and take pictures of all of these people and all of these children that like nobody really seemed to give a fuck about, you know? And I started thinking like, well, okay, well, I don't have to be paid to do it because, you know, I don't know, at 24, 25, I'm thinking that I understand what you do as a photographer and what famous photographers claim to fame is. Well, my thought was, you know, I'll study all these different techniques and old techniques and styles and figure out how I want to present my work so my technique could be at least unique to me and combine it with a subject matter that's not a famous person. You know, in my mind, that guy on that documentary who was 50 years old, he's famous. He's famous from that photo shoot with Gordon Parks and being in Life magazine and being interviewed on the documentary, and his life went a certain way because of that experience. So, you know, that's what I'm doing when I'm around my god sister's daughter. So this is just kind of one of those days where we were sitting and coloring in my mother's living room, and me being able to continue what I had already started to do, which is photograph the people around me in ways that I was never told to, and, you know, kind of start to tell this story about the children around me, and then I guess my experience as a creative and an artist simultaneously. This is a group of young people that live on my street or kind of come and hang by my house. I'm the guy who opened up my garage and got tools and fixed on bikes, and kids come over and fix their flats and all this other stuff. Me and my interaction with the bike and kids on bikes is definitely birthed out of me being in probably all of the art education circles and pockets. So me having all those experiences, I'm learning programming, I'm watching how programs are set up, and, you know, people are saying there's no programs for little boys, and everybody's saying this, or it's only a couple. So I started thinking like, okay, what could I do to figure out how to get the attention of the kid that seems to be reflective of me, the kid that seems to be interested in things that I'm interested in. So I started to photograph, dirt bikes and kids popping wheelies. Initially is how it kind of really started. And from that, it was like, oh, okay, well, this could literally be the hook. This is my way to engage. It's the bike. I'm always on a bike. I ride a pedal bike. So I started engaging the kids on my street. I said, before I'm around the city, maybe I'll just fix the flats and all that kind of stuff. So that's literally what it kind of turned into. And then I kind of really, really learned the world that clearly I've been a part of since I was a child, which is me on my bike, as a form of all the things that a bike is to a 7-year-old or a 17-year-old. And I got the camera around my neck, and I'm, like I said, making sure that I am starting to engage in the stories, the experiences, and take pictures that I didn't know to take pictures of when I was the same age as them. Because when I was their age, I had a camera. I was a photographer at their age. So this is another one of those moments. Reflection of self kind of really started this who am I journey that I consciously started to take myself on. This photograph is maybe the first or second of this sequence of images that is me taking pictures of the children around me when their parent is hiring me to do a portrait of them. But I'm trying to get a portfolio shot. It's me looking for and finding reflections. It's me looking for and finding this horizontal pattern that's finds its way in a lot of my images. So this kind of started that journey. I mean, even me looking at the title after I titled it Reflection of Self, and this idea of this kid that's looking in this book, and in this book, what they're looking and finding is who they are. I kind of really, really adopted that and took that on consciously, to be able to get to, baby bike life. At the moment where I'm photographing this picture and giving it this title, I'm at a point in my life where I'm not understanding who the hell I am, what I'm supposed to be doing with these things that I know how to do. And I was actually living in New York at the time when I photographed this image. But I came home to do the photo shoot. And this was around the time I'm noticing that the strongest images to me emotionally were these images that I had taken when I was in Cleveland. This is an image that probably played a role in my very early move back to Cleveland. It helped complement my desire to understand myself and to be able to find myself creatively with the photography that I'm making to help communicate who that self is, you know what I mean? Or who that self is not. So yeah, this is a very, very significant picture on my artist journey. He's 21, 22 now. So it's very interesting listen to and watch him engage in this, because this was a huge mural on the side of the Cleveland Public Library several years ago. And I use this as a test image when I'm printing. I got copper plates of this image that I've given him. He got his first apartment. I'm like, you still got? He's like, I definitely still got. So I'm kind of watching this thing. I feel like this interaction that I watch with the Gordon Parks, and you kind of see these young people kind of grow up and communicate how this level of engagement, helped change, affect, or shape their lives. I'm having that experience in real time for some of the older photographs. Some of these 10-year-olds, like I said, they're 20 now. And that's been a very, very gratifying experience for me, because it's like I can't even explain what I'm trying to do as much as time goes on, and it's like it starts to reveal itself for me. I was born in a dark room as a photographer. I love the images in the dark room. So what happened is it turned into me starting to try to figure out how to combine the digital process and the conventional process in a way that it started to feel like what I was experiencing in the dark room. that's what kind of got me to the epoxy. The epoxy, for me, allowed my blacks to stay rich in a similar way that if you're in a dark room and you're printing and your stuff is sitting in a fixer or it's sitting in the water, those blacks, when they're submerged in the chemicals or the water, it's like it's a darker black. You know what I mean? It's like the wet black is darker than the dry black, ultimately. So once I started playing around with the epoxy and putting it on the image and watching how it dried, I was loving that it looked like it was still wet, because it reminded me of printing all these other photographers' work in the darkroom for the first couple of years of me even living in New York. And ultimately, I was tired of the mat and I was tired of the frame. So it was me saying, okay, how can I take these other worlds that I'm a part of? My mom owned a construction company since I was 9. You know, my art store is Home Depot and Lowe's. So I started to think to myself, how could I make this stuff look more like a painting and change the presentation of it? And that's when I started to really present the stuff full bleed. I started making my own wood panels. I was tired of the image being so delicate and in a book and in a drawer and behind glass. I wanted it to be big and I wanted it to be heavy. I wanted it to be able to drop and not break. I wanted it to not be able to scratch. So it was all this stuff that I had learned, for my 27 years in photography, that I had decided finally what I wanted, for myself and for my work. So that's kind of how I got to the wood constructed panel that I hand make. I could buy them, I could do all that, but I love working with my hands. I love working with the tools. I love touching the stuff. I love my fingerprints being on it. I love the sawdust being a part of it. I love the dust that floats and falls into it. I do some other processes and it kind of feels like when I'm putting varnish on my little small tintypes, and it's not a perfect process. Something about the digital printing process had a level of I don't know, kind of got rid of the mystery and these happy accidents that you used to get when you scratch a piece of film and the emulsion is off, and now you got these specks and you didn't put it in the sleeves properly, so you got all these dots and dust. It's this whole aesthetic that kind of got overlooked and lost. I'm a rule learner and a rule breaker, and I used to be a student of all of this stuff, and I realized once I stopped asking for help and questions and suggestions, it was like that was the moment I became an artist with all of this. It's like, this is what I'm doing because this is what I want to do for 1,000 different reasons.